Hi Aravind, thank you for participating in GTM Talk. And this is the first episode. Super grateful to have you on GTM Talk.
Yeah, just thanks for you know getting me featured as the first participant, and really appreciate that uh, you took the time to get me. And although we know each other previously, it's always good to be featured on a podcast for the first time. So yeah,
Yep. So for those who don't know Aravind yet, Aravind is the poster boy of every family in India. Right? Aravind was a topper in school. Aravind studied in IIT. Aravind studied in IIM. Aravind worked in the best of companies. So Aravind is the poster boy. Any family you go to in India, they want their child to be like Aravind, right? And then Aravind went on to start on his company, Hypto, raised 3 million in funding. I think they were at about 5 million ARR. So it's success all the way through. At least when I see it from this side, that's how it seems, Aravind. But I think for this we need to go back, and I think you need to start with your backstory and give us a little background about you as a person, and just a little bit background, and then we'll get into Hypto.
sure, Ashish. So I think from an outsider's perspective, it might seem that way, that like every parent wants their son or daughter to study in the top colleges or universities in the country. But I don't think the reality is that straightforward. If you go into the details and nitty-gritties, and if you ask my parents whether I was a poster child for them, I am pretty sure they will have a lot of other things to say. But yeah, going back to my background, yeah, I mean, so I've been born and brought up in Chennai, and studied in DAV, which is like one of the most academically focused schools in the city, right? So by default, if you studied in that school, it was always going to be that you are going to get into a path which put you on that track of going into the top colleges in the country, right? Like most of the students in my batch ended up in the top engineering colleges in the country by default. So that was kind of the starting point, right? Like my parents, coming from a middle class background, they wanted their son to break out of that mold, and for them, education was the best way to get there, right? Like most, I would say, middle class parents in the country, right? And I think that's the reason why they put me in that school. And from then on, it continued. They didn't have to force me to study or anything, but when you're in that competitive school, and by default you have a competitive nature, it happens without saying that you end up studying and then you end up getting good grades. It was not I was actually, I realized it very much later that I had not thought very deeply about what I wanted to do in my life. So when I was in school, right, it was just about going with the flow, getting good grades, doing what my parents wanted, and then going to a college that my parents told me was one of the best in the country, right, and studying for that, studying for those exams, and eventually being able to crack them, right. But it was not because I actually gave deep thought and said I wanted to be an engineer and I wanted to get into this university. And honestly, if I had given deep thought, I don't know what I might have done, but the path could have been very much different as well, right?
Maybe a director.
Yeah, possible. Yeah, I mean, everybody who's a film buff eventually says, I want to be a film director, right? And I don't think I was uh, anyway averse from that. So definitely want to, that's like a dream, right? Create my
Right.
own
So,
movie. Yeah.
right. So, Aravind, is success guaranteed if somebody studies in IITs and IIMs?
So I have this framework for what defines success, right? Like, okay, so first the question then becomes, what is success, right? And each person has their own definition of success or failure, right? So
Let's assume,
if I
let's
had,
assume success. Let's assume success is like any middle class family in India. Success for them is making a lot of money,
yeah, yeah,
right? But
right.
some people might define how much time you're able to spend with family and just. But I'm saying, let's take success equal to money. If
Yeah.
you take that framework, if I study in a IIT or an IIM, can I make a lot of money?
Sure. So I think money is primarily a function of three things, right? One, your status or your privilege, basically coming from the country that you're born in, the state that you're born in, the parents that you're born to, your pre-existing background, all of that, right? Like that's practically 70% of what contributes to how much money you would end up making, right? Like for most people. The second comes from the amount of effort that you end up putting, right, into doing anything. And then the third is the time, which acts as a compounding factor. Right? So for me, the biggest factor is definitely your background, somebody's background, and their existing financial position. Because end of the day, when somebody's family has, you know, a lot of wealth, that acts as a compounding effect in itself, right? And that acts as the foundation for you to take it up and achieve great things monetary wise, right? But then here, like you said, when you're saying IIT or other colleges, top engineering college in the country, to get into that requires work, right? And for me, that's the second most important factor into determining how much money that you can end up making, right? And by the necessity, you have to fight hard to get into those colleges. You would have put in a ton of effort and work, which will eventually translate to some amount of monetary benefits for that person, for that individual in the long run, right? And in my personal experience, I can definitely say studying in those colleges adds a lot of visibility and foundation that helps in the long run for you to eventually be able to make money. Right?
Got it. And did studying in any of these colleges, like there's a thing in the startup community that if you study in IIT, IIM, VCs and angel investors just blindly back you, right? So, my so studying in IIT, IIM, do you think that was one of the reasons why VCs backed Hypto up? Was that a factor?
Yeah, I do think that the credibility or the perceived credibility. I don't say that is actually credibility, but the perceived credibility of such a tag that gets associated opens up doors. That's a given, right? End of the day, the network that you get and the access that you get is much higher when you are being part of these kind of educational institutes, right? And when you look at it from the investor standpoint, right, like they are looking it as a way to filter, people, and they also have limited time and resources at their end, right? Like how do, like if I'm, for example, if I'm a founder and I wanted to hire somebody, and if I have 500 odd resumes in front of me for a single opening, how do I end up filtering and getting the right people to my company? Now that's a question that I have to answer for myself, right? Different people answer it differently, but end of the day, you have limited time, you have to prioritize. And in my experience, I have seen the educational institute somebody goes to acts as a filtering criteria for a lot of external world, right? And they do filter based on this, and that opens up doors. I'm not saying that is going to help you raise the capital that you want for your business or anyway, right? Like that requires a lot of other things to go, and you have to make your pitch, you have to successfully demonstrate the problem statement, the market, and your understanding, what are the insights that you bring to the table. All of that has to be demonstrated, but it definitely provides you higher access compared to, say, if you are not from those educational institutes.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Right. So now, okay. So I think we've covered this with respect to your educational journey, and then I think the first job you got was Standard Chartered, and then you moved from banks to. You need to tell us a little about your professional journey, and then we can jump into crypto.
Sure. So my first job was actually not Standard Chartered. It was so I was placed in ICICI on campus, right? Like at my B school. So it was a job that I was there for like 3 to 4 weeks. So technically, I don't think I ever put it on my LinkedIn or any other places. It was less than a month. So that was during a phase of my life where I wanted to, I would call it a rebellious stint, right? Like I wanted to be in Bombay. That was the heart of Dalal Street, financial capital of India. But for some reason, I got transferred to Chennai, and I was like, no, this is not cutting it. I wanted to be in Bombay, so I kind of went against the flow and just said, I'll quit it. I'll look for a new job. Uh, and then eventually landed up in Standard Chartered a few months later. That was not a finance role at all. Uh, that was a back office operations kind of role. And from then on, I moved to Citibank, which I would consider as technically my first full-time job. Right, I was there for 4 years, close to 4 years. I started off as a product marketing manager before moving to full-time product management. I was handling the net banking platform for Citibank, and then had a stint in Amazon for like 11 months before beginning Hypto in 2018.
Right. And from your first job till the last job you had before starting, so what was the salary of your first job and what is the salary of your last job?
Wait, so the on-campus job at ICAC was I think 12 lakhs, right? And
Okay.
then
This was
yeah,
which year in
uh,
Aravind?
this was in 2012, right?
Got
So
it.
2012, yeah, that was the offer that they made in B schools, I think ICAC standard package, and then I quit it and I was just looking out for something else. Uh, Ranging from film directing opportunities, but eventually my parents were on my tail and I landed up at Standard Chartered. I think that job was 7.5 lakhs, and yeah, 7.5 lakhs was my first job. Right, I was there for 7 8 months. Then moved to Citibank, which started off at 13.5 lakhs, and then yeah, over years you get promotions, you get hikes. So when I quit Citibank, my last drawn salary was around like 21 lakhs, right, uh, annually. And then that's kind of that was my benchmark for myself, right? Okay, if somebody paid me more than 21 lakhs, like when you shift a job, at that point, I would say it's still the startup market was not as mature as it is today in India, like in 2016 types, right? And I actually got 2 or 3 offers in Chennai, Bangalore from a startup, from uh, technology companies that were public in India. Like, for example, Suleika, I got an offer. Right, all of these things happened, but then eventually, and these were all in the range of 30 to 40% hikes in line with what market paid. Right? But then suddenly Amazon came in, and then they offered a package which was more than 100% above what I was getting at Citibank, and that kind of blew my mind. Like, how is somebody making such an offer? Like that is not at all in line with what the market was giving at that point. And after I joined Amazon, that's kind of was an eye-opening moment for me. Like I was getting paid 45 lakhs plus, right? And Citibank was paying me 21 lakhs. It was just a completely different experience from the sense that like a technology company, how they perceive talent was completely different from how any non-technology company perceive talent. Right? They look at it as a profit center, right? Whereas every other company looks at it as a cost center. Salaries are looked at as cost centers for most companies, whereas technology companies are the only ones that look at people as a highly leverageable resource that can generate additional profits for them in the long run, right? And when you look at it that way, 40 lakhs is nothing for them, right? Like whatever that number was, it's kind of minuscule in the actual business impact that you can get uh, for the time that you spend doing the business is like 10x of that, right? It's a highly leverageable uh, return on investment for Amazon itself.
There's a perception that if you earn a lot of money, work satisfaction automatically comes, or it's manageable. Is that true?
Okay, so I think you are asking the question to the wrong person here. So yeah, I mean, work satisfaction to different people mean different things, right? Like, but I'm, I think it is unlikely that it is always tied to the money that you earn, right? While that can act as an initial motivation, like obviously when I joined Amazon, I was very happy that I got this huge hike. I moved to Bangalore. I was in the startup capital of India, working with people who were smarter than me. All of that was there, right? But then after a certain point, uh, you start thinking about what is the value that I bring to the table. At least that was how it was for me, right? And when I started looking at it that way, and also from a lens of, am I actually creating enough opportunities for myself that provides me the wealth that I want to create per unit of time spent, right? And that was the question that I ended up answering. Amazon was never going to cut it for me. Right? The value that I created at Amazon was like you. It doesn't matter, right? Like whether I'm there or not, Amazon is going to function, and that kind of is a different sense of feeling for me. I wanted to be part of something that where I can actually do things and things move, right? I wanted to be that core to some business line. Like at Citibank, I was feeling that way, even though my salary was like half of what Amazon paid, but I did end up getting the feeling that, what I did mattered to the company. And if I was not there, things wouldn't move, say, as quickly, or business will not change. I mean, business won't change if I was not there, right? So, but in Amazon, that was not the feeling that I was getting. So that's why I eventually decided to quit and do something online.
Got it. And then Hypto started. So how how did you arrive at the problem statement of Hypto? Did Hypto start as Hypto what it was? Did it go through multiple iterations? Uh, Fill us in.
Sure. So when I quit Amazon, my father is a small businessman, right? So he has a paper distribution business. He also has a very small printing press unit in Chennai, right? So my initial thought process was I want to do something on my own, and where to start other than, when you have your own family business. I just felt like it was the most obvious thing to do. Go work with my father, learn from him, and see if there is a potential to scale up that business, and then eventually use my learnings from there to start my own company, right? That was my thought process initially. But then after I landed in Chennai from Bangalore, now the day I quit, Abhishek, who's my co-founder at Hypto, and Togai, so we are friends from school, right? So we know each other for more than 25 years. We studied in the same school, so we've always been in touch. And he had kind of quit his job, where he was working at Zargate, which got acquired by Freshworks, right? And he was like, I wanted to either join a very small company or start up on my own. That was the mindset he was in, right? And we just got to talking, right? And I remember it was, I think the date was also very clear, like February 27th, right? So March 1st, I was like, so I had quit my job in Amazon Feb 21st of 2018. That was my last day. I had come to Chennai the next day. Then March 1st, I was planning to join my father's business. Like literally 2 days before that, he kind of said, let's catch up. He was also in Chennai. So we went to our favorite dessert shop in Besant Nagar and had our favorite dessert. Both of us had the same taste as well, right? And then over 3-4 hours of discussion, we eventually decided that, it was now or never kind of moment for me, at least at that point. And I was like, okay, let's just do this. I can figure out things on my own. It's not necessary that I have to go and learn from my father to actually, launch something and build something from scratch. I have a partner here who provides very complementary skill sets to me, and we can figure out things together, whatever we do on the fly, right? And uh, he's an eternal optimist, right? And while I am more of a realist to a certain extent, I would say a skeptic as well in many things. And I felt it was a very complementary skill set that we were bringing to the table, uh, and all of that kind of fitted in very nicely to starting our journey together. And then March 1st, the timeline that I had set myself for joining my father's business, we said, let's just start brainstorming ourselves. Like we had not thought of any problem statement or idea, right? So it was like, then the timeline started. Like next 2-3 months, from March, April, I think we were just sitting in my home, figuring out what to do next, like exploring multiple ideas and strategies, just researching. And then eventually we saw a company called Dosh in the US, right? So DOSH. And they were building something in the offline retail space, building a loyalty management solution that helps offline retailers market better, acquire customers at a cheaper cost, and retain them better. Right? Essentially trying to uh, help them compete with all the e-commerce companies through a tech-enabled manner, right? So it was kind of a marketplace model, which was what, say, Groupon started off with, but these guys were doing it in a much better fashion, and there was no similar player in the Indian market, and we were feeling that that was a very good business model to start off with in India. considering the nature of the offline retail space in India was uh, more than 95% at that point in time, right? And we were basically inspired by the line that Jeff Bezos keeps saying: "Do not look at what will change in the next 10 years to take strategic decisions. Look at what won't change, right? And then you can always figure out a strategy to answer those challenges, right? For example, no customer is ever going to say, I don't want a cheaper product at a faster timeline and I don't want choice, right? No customer is ever going to say that. And this was the strategy that Amazon used. So we felt like offline retail was something that was never going to change in the next decade. Maybe COVID proved us wrong. So, but yeah, for us at that point, it did make sense, and we decided to take the plunge in that business and started Hypto as a loyalty management solution for offline merchants and retailers.
Right, but then Hypto evolved into something and raised money for something else, right? You started out at
Yeah,
offline rate, but before we get into that, right? From what I understand, Abhishek, neither Abhishek or you have any experience in the retail space,
yeah,
right? Neither are you guys coders or technology people per se, right?
yeah.
So like, how did you finalize that retail? Like, you didn't have expertise in retail, but then you chose, say, "No, let's go the retail bro." Like, how did you
Right.
come to that consensus? So today, in today's world, let me put this in context. In today's world, do you need to be an expert at something to start something in that domain? Like, that's this thing that if I'm in a particular domain, then eventually you build the expertise and then you start something of your own. So in that similar domain, right? You've come from banking, you've come from Amazon. Abhishek has come from a slightly different domain as well, but then you're going into a completely different domain. So how did that happen? Like, and do you believe that you need to have expertise to start something?
So this is my again personal belief. I would rather value somebody's. I mean, this is not just in terms of your capability to start up or anything, right? Like even when I say talk to somebody and look at evaluating them to join our company, this is how I look at it, right? What matters is not what your starting point is, but the slope, right? So if you look at it from a graph standpoint, you have an intercept and then you have slope, right? Like you basically draw a straight line which is like y equal to mx plus c, right? Like that's a straight line graph, right? Where x is the x-axis, y is the y-axis, right? And here m is the slope, right? Slope of the graph itself, and c is the starting point, which is the intercept, right? Now, different people have different starting points, right? Different people, like somebody has a lot more experience in some domain, so they have a higher starting point than somebody who doesn't have that experience. But if somebody who doesn't have that experience has a much higher learning curve, much faster learning curve, then they are definitely going to cross the other person sooner than later, right? And all that matters is, can you provide that sustenance to yourself to keep surviving, so that you keep learning, and be able to cross that barrier that say your competition has or other people have particular sector, right? So for me, that's what is more important. And I think personally, both of us have had like above average learning curves, right? And or at least we were confident in that side of things. So it didn't matter what our starting point was, unless it was a deep tech domain or something, right? Like if you are looking to rewrite something from scratch, like obviously we are not going to go and learn say rocket science, right? Like that requires a subject matter expertise. Like you cannot build a SpaceX or you cannot build a Tesla. I mean, all of those constraints are automatically, intuitively understood by us, right? Uh, but retail or say marketing or anything that was operational driven, like building a food delivery platform, building a loyalty management solution, like all of that was not something that was way out of our learning curve. We could always get there provided our we kept on improving ourselves, right? That was the thought process, right? Building a distribution network in the country or something along those lines, right? Like we also knew what our uh, learning abilities were. One thing that I think we were very much aware of is we were very clear on what our strengths and weaknesses were, right? Like for example, I remember brainstorming this capability of or like solution of solving for online game streaming, right? So I'm I have played a lot of video games in the past, and I still do. Like frequent gamer, I really am passionate about that particular space, right? But the thing was, like, this was one of the first thoughts that I had. Why not build an online streaming service for gaming, right?
Like
Like
Twitch?
proper, like what say Google Stadia had until recently, right? Google Stadia shut down, but similar to what Google Stadia launched, right? This was a thought process for me. But the problem with that is the amount of tech expertise that is required to build requires you to have very deep fundamental knowledge about computer science, right? And both of us were not computer science engineers. We were mechanical engineers. So that kind of obviously made it very hard for us to, build something in that space unless we become experts in computer science, right? Or even things like building database products, building cloud computing products. Now, all of that, we were aware of that space, but we knew we could never do something that brought in our learnings and capabilities in a time frame that made actual sense, right? Obviously, now over a period of time, we have learned a lot of technology aspects as to businesses. And today, if you ask me, are we equipped to build a say cloud computing business? I can say we are definitely more equipped than we were 4 5 years back. That is for sure, but maybe not at still at the scale that would be required, to build a proper scalable business. So that's why I think retail was something that it was not too far away from us, right? Because end of the day, we had been to business school, we had certain background and experiences of selling products to customers, and some of it was replicable, some of it had to be learned, and it was not way out of our reach.
Got it. Got it. Right. So Aravind, let's keep. I think Hypto I traded a couple of times, and then
Yeah,
Hypto became a payment gateway for crypto exchanges in India. Right. So let's skip to that part. Right. How did you arrive at that problem statement? How did you validate the problem? How many customers did you speak to? Can we get into the nitty-gritty of that?
sure. So, like you said, right? Like crypto pivoted a lot. We were a bootstrap company until that point, right? Like until very late in our journey. So, like from 2018 when we started till 2021, 3 years we were bootstrapped. So our job was to ensure survival of the company no matter what, right? So that was the only thing that was driving us, right? How do we ensure that we live to fight another day? That was the only question that we needed to answer. And for that, you necessarily had constraints automatically coming in. You have to generate cash flow yourself. Right? We were not in the market to raise capital until we got to a certain scalable product ourselves. Right? So we were very clear that uh, we would not be going and pitching investors unless we were confident of this being a potentially VC fundable business, because there are certain businesses which are VC fundable, but there are a lot of businesses which masquerade as VC fundable but are actually not capable of being a VC fundable business, right? We were very much conscious of that because by
So
definition.
was your goal to be a VC fundable business, or was your goal to be a 100 crore profitable company?
So we were taking it. We were taking those decisions depending on what the business required, right? So if the business required us to raise capital, like for example, today, like an e-commerce company, a Flipkart, definitely has to be a VC fundable business, or a Swiggy has to be a
Right.
VC fundable business. But there are a lot more other companies. For example, even Hypto, to a certain extent, I would say, did not require VC capital, right? It could actually sustain itself as a not a, I mean, maybe not the right word, but yeah, decently large business that was extremely profitable and growing at a good pace, right? Like even Hypto was that, and eventually ended up being that as well, right? So a payment gateway business, for example, that was what Hypto was eventually. Can do that. Like you can be a profitable, self-sustaining entity, growing at a very good pace, without aiming for like $1 billion outcome at all points in time, which is a necessity if you are a VC fundable business. You have to aim for that $1 billion outcome always, right?
Right. So how did you come up with the problem statement? Aravind?
Yeah. So there is this line which there was this post about PMF which Mark Anderson writes, right? Like, uh, a great founder in a bad market, the market wins. A bad founder in a great market, the market wins, right? So that's what I think eventually happened to us. So, I mean, it didn't matter what the quality of the founder here is, the market eventually wins. That's what essentially that line implies, right? So, a lot of it was down to timing, being at the right place at the right time as well. So, we started off as a, like I said, offline retail loyalty analytics platform. Then we tried launching the product, but there were constraints around. There were a lot of dependencies on external institutions and integrations that we required to even launch that product. Then we decided to pivot to something that minimized those dependencies and launched a neo banking platform with a few different banking partners, right? And we launched an SME facing neo banking app. And we had decent amount of traction, but again, that problem with that business model was we were burning money without actually making any revenue. Being a bootstrap company, that was not sustainable. So we were still looking to change our business model to something where we could generate immediate cash flow. And that's when one customer, one SME who actually had downloaded our mobile app, reached out to us on phone and actually asked us, can we expose the same functionalities that we have given in the mobile app as APIs to them? Right? Essentially, they were looking to build their own customized layers and wanted more flexibility than what our mobile app provided to them. And they were looking to use our APIs to solve that problem. Right? So when one customer asked this, we sort of like, okay, how much time is it going to take? Because they said they were willing to pay for the customization, the API development, and all of that, right? So we were like, okay, let's just do a hacky way of doing this, and I think, built the entire API facing dashboard and everything in like less than a week's time, right? And Tools did that, who's our CTO and tech co-founder, and then we exposed that API to them. Then we thought, okay, we have this API now. What do we do next? We just see if people are willing to pay for it and ran some Google ads, right? With very focused and targeted keywords, and suddenly started seeing a lot of inbound leads who started using our platform and were actually paying money, right? While we were giving it as a mobile app, people were not willing to pay for it. But when we exposed it as APIs, which help with automation at scale, people were willing to more than happy to pay for it, right? And we had like 10 or 15 customers until then who are like paying a decent amount of money. I mean, it was the first money, so any money was seeming like decent money for us at that point in time. And that's when I think March 5th, I remember the year that is March 5th, 2020, the Supreme Court lifted the ban on banking and financial institutions providing financial services to crypto exchanges in the country, right? And we immediately looked at that segment as a potential customer base. Like, we wanted to go hard into that market because we were able to solve a direct pain point for them, in our opinion. And one of my MBA juniors was actually running a crypto exchange in the country, right? And I just reached out to him, and he was like more than happy to say, like, let me just test it out and see if it solves our use case. And they tested it in a day or two, and it was immediately helping them process payments at scale. And we felt this was going to be a potentially decent enough. I mean, we don't need to burn money, right? Like, we could survive. That was the thought process at the point in time for us, and we were like, okay, let's go behind this market. Now, crypto ban is lifted by the Supreme Court. We can actually start acquiring customers who are in the crypto space. So we started reaching out to them. We started pitching our product, and we were actually, since we were very much focused on this vertical, we were able to, I think, outbeat competition as well by our focused approach, by our customer support, and all of that helped. And we started supporting all of the top crypto exchanges in the country within a very short span of time.
Got it. So, Aravind, so basically, one customer's need became your entire company, so to say,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
before building this out for this one customer, did you validate this problem with other people, whether they want something similar, or you were like, this customer is an important customer, let's just build it out. There will definitely be a need for other people.
Right. So, like I said, I think it all comes down to what is the time frame you're looking to solve problems for, right? In the previous neo banking thing, right? Like, we spoke to a bunch of SMEs. We spoke to a lot of them, right? Like, my father himself is an SME, right? And my father did use my mobile app, or the mobile app that we had built, right? And he felt it was a great product, like specifically for his needs. And I spoke to a bunch of his friends and a lot of people in the Chennai ecosystem who are SMEs, right? And literally everyone we spoke to said, this solves my problem. I can use it. Just give it to me, right? But the problem was none of them were willing to pay money for it, right? And being a bootstrap company, that was a challenge for us. Now, like if you look at a lot of these SME neo banking apps in India, there was a time period where a bunch of them came, raised a ton of capital, and they also acquired customers, right? They have significantly
Right.
large user bases. We also had 50,000 plus downloads. We had more than 10,000 daily active users at one point, right? But the problem is nobody is paying you money, right? Like you think of, okay, 6 months later, 1 year later, I can do some cross sell. I can sell some other products to them which they might end up buying. But our timeline was not that high, right? When we did validate this problem statement, people said they resonated with it, but they were not willing to pay for that particular product. The goal was to eventually monetize them later on using some other cross-sellable product, right? And that necessarily required us to raise additional capital from external third parties, right? And that's something which we were always not averse to, but we were always skeptical of, right? Like how much can you depend on third parties? And because of that, the second pivot that we made, the API business, it was not something that we validated because we were trying to do anything for somebody who would pay us money, right? And it was just one customer asked, he said he was willing to pay us money. We did it. He did pay us money. We launched a few Google ads, which was not so expensive. Like our monthly budget was like 25,000-30,000 rupees. We did that, and we started generating a good amount of revenue, right? So I don't think it was specifically validated, but you don't have to validate everything as well. That was our experience, right? Because a lot of things you end up validating, if you are biased in the way you ask questions, you end up getting answers that you want to hear rather than the actual pain that your users and customers are facing, right? Which is,
Got it.
I think, what happened to our in our previous avatar.
Got it. And how did you get your first customers, first 10 customers? Was it all through personal connections? Was it through LinkedIn? How did you get the first 10 customers?
So the first customer, like I said, was coming from somebody who downloaded our mobile app and then reached out to
Yeah.
us. That was the first customer, right? And then the second to, I would say, the next set of 6, 7 customers came through Google Ads. Right? We just put targeted ads on like payment APIs, payout APIs, fund transfer APIs, all of that, right? Like targeted keyword ads on Google. And honestly, since that was not our business, we actually did not do a lot of research. If we had maybe done a lot of research previously, we were not trying to be a fintech company, right? So we did not do that research around Google Ads and what were the keywords that were generating traffic.
Yeah.
But apparently, they were, right, and a lot of people were searching for it, and they ended up buying our product. So that was the next set of, I would say, 6, 7 customers. And then once the
And did you have a sales team? Did you have a sales team that went out and sold as well, or all was inbound leads that Hypto was looking at?
So the sales team was only Abhishek and me, right? Like the entire company itself was 5 people at that point. So it was Tulls, Anto, Vaso, who were our engineers, and Abhishek and me, right? Like, and Abhishek and I were the only 2 salespeople, I would say, and I was the only support person. Tulls, Anto, and Vaso took care of all the engineering side of things. So it was just 5 people. And then the crypto ban was lifted. The next spurt of customers started coming in when Abhishek and I started reaching out to these crypto exchanges through
How
cold
did you reach
outreaches.
out to these crypto exchanges?
So we knew they had a definite pain point. We knew they had a need, right? It was just about competing with our competition to solve their pain point, right? So LinkedIn was the primary source of communication outreaches, right? And since we also had friends of friends network through using our own connects based on his alum network, my alum network, we started leveraging that to see whom we could reach out to through warm intros and not just cold intros. And a lot of people were receptive. Like, for example, we were able to set up calls with unicorn companies, not just crypto exchanges, right? Non-crypto exchanges as well. Like, we were able to set up calls with them. I think this is where, again, the educational institutes that you go to help, right? Your alum networks. You have a list of people who are already working on these unicorn companies who are your alums, right? And when you talk to them, when you say that, I'm from your same campus, they are able to also resonate and, at least schedule a call, even if they don't buy your product, right? And give you a warm intro to the person responsible in that company. So all of those things help, right? So it was just cold outreaches through whatever medium that we could reach out to them on.
Did you do cold emailing?
No, I don't think I'm okay. I don't want to generalize, but in India, I think cold emailing uh, just generally does not work, right? At least in the space that we were in, which was fintech and payments, definitely cold emailing to people does not help a lot, right? Like uh, I do see a lot of good responses on LinkedIn. That was the primary channel of communication, initiating conversations. But apart from that, cold emailing somebody, uh, I don't think we ever did. Or I mean, we did to a very limited capacity, and felt it was not going to be helpful.
Got it. And did you have a CRM in place of sorts? Did you like because as I understand you were a small company, but you also
Yeah.
require good data. So did you have a CRM in place, or it was all Excel sheets and Google sheets for you?
Sure. So, I mean, our so Tul's my tech co-founder, right? He had done a fabulous job of creating an internal tooling, what we internally call as an admin console, right? Like he had built that extensively. So, uh, and we were able to use that itself as our database of sorts, right? And it was just five of us end of the day, so we could just access that. All five of us had access to that. We could just look at which customer signed up, what was their status is, and how we can follow up, right? And since it was just Abhishek and me trying to follow up on sales calls, I guess it was purely our own internal tracking that was required and not a collaborative thing or something, right? Like when you need a CRM, you are essentially a large team. You have a sales team of few salespeople, and you need
Yep.
collaboration to know what others are doing, so that you can share all of these learnings across each other. We were too small, I think, to have a need for such a solution.
Got it. Let's just dive a little deeper into your acquisition channel. So from what I understand, you did Google AdWords, and the other main thing were referrals. There are other acquisition channels like SEO, your press releases, your partnerships, community building. Did Hypto do any of these things? And if yes, what were the results like?
So I think SEO is not something that we did on. Like we just optimize our page with three or four keywords, and since we started getting a good word of mouth, and I think our website was good enough to not have a very bad, bounce rate or something, and our page speed was also optimized. So I think to that extent, we did the basic sanity stuff for SEO. We didn't write a lot of content, for example. We didn't do that content marketing kind of things at all, but we just did, page speed, optimize our page for conversion and lower bounce rate, and I think that started helping us rank for a few keywords that we wanted to rank for in the top three of Google search. Apart from this, we didn't do much SEO activities. And then, yeah, paid ads, we did do that. Google ads was one channel. But word of mouth was kind of our biggest strength, I would say, since we were a verticalized player. We were not a horizontal player targeting literally every industry, right? We were a verticalized player. A bunch of our customers were in the crypto space, and that was a very close knit group, and that was just starting out in India, right? In India, crypto was not yet the way it is recognized in the Valley or other places. It was still a very nascent space, and very few people were aware of the space, and a lot of people were getting into the space. And when somebody is new is getting into the space, what are they going to do? They are going to basically ask existing players who are already there, what do I do? How do I navigate, right? How do I want to process payments? If I wanted to process payments, who do I reach out to,
Yeah.
right? So that's the sort of questions they end up asking. And since we were working with all of the top crypto exchanges in the country, that kind of automatically made us a de facto choice for any new person who was entering, right?
So
And
was there a
we
community of sorts like within the crypto exchanges in India? Was there some sort of community where you put the word out, or is it purely word of mouth through connections that you got your leads?
I think it was the latter, right? So we didn't have a community of sorts. Like, I mean, all of it was one-to-one conversations. We didn't do one-to-many conversations
Got
or
it.
conversations within each other. So it was just one-on-one conversations. But when we reached out to somebody cold, they knew who we were because they had heard of us through their network, or most people otherwise ended up reaching out to us themselves, right? So this was the primary two ways of word of mouth helping us, because we were so being a vertical player helped, right? Like what we did after a certain point was actually revamp our first website was very generic. talking purely about payments and payments infrastructure APIs. But then we did a revamp of our website to talk specifically as payments APIs for crypto, right? And I think that also helped uh, build that credibility as a verticalized player. And anybody who built crypto solutions in India reached out to us.
Got it. And how many leads were you getting per month? They say, like, let's say at your peak.
See, the number of leads we were getting would be, I think, at our peak, it was like 1,000 odd a month, right? That was the
Right.
peak, right? So, but I mean, there is also, when you're running a payments company in India, you have to be very much aware of a lot of low quality leads that could end up being, frauds or uh, not running legitimate businesses, for example, right?
So how did you have
That's
a
the
filtration mechanism?
So the starting point is the KYC checks, right? Like we are a self-serve platform. When somebody signs up, they have to also submit a list of documents, right? Like lead would be I'm talking about somebody who has just signed up and not submitted documents. That's the lead, right? But there is a lot of documents that somebody has to submit before they are considered for evaluation and activation, right? So first step is for them to actually complete the documentation process and submit all the documents that are required. So we that would already sort it down by like 10%, like filter it down to 10% of the overall, right? Not everybody submits their documents. So you have like 100 odd leads a month to then sort through and see which are high quality, which are all running legitimate business and so on, right? So, and we ended up doing it manually. A lot of the work was done personally by me. I reviewed, the company's website, what was their business model, are they actually who they are, right? Verifying them, and that process was taken care of by me. And
Looks like you were
we
working 18 hours a day.
yeah, I mean, so definitely, I think that was one of the most hardworking periods of my career.
Good
Uh,
problems to have.
yeah, definitely. Like when you are actually making money and growing at a good pace, I would think that the only thing that makes work, the a lot of people end up saying, they get burnt out from the work, right? And, as a solution, people say when you work very hard, people say you can face burnout and you should always do it in a sustainable manner, so on, right? And most of the people whom I've read suggest solutions as, take a break, take some time off, or do some travel, whatever, do something, take rest, essentially, right? But I have actually found in my experience that, like, if there is sustained momentum in your business, the only thing that will make you burn out is if that momentum breaks, right? The solution to burnout is actually your business growing. If your business keeps growing, you don't care. You're not going to feel burnt out at all because you are always going to face new problems. Like when do you feel burnout? Because you are facing the same problems and a very monotonous way of doing things, right? But when
Right.
the business is growing, a lot of problems a lot of the problems that occur are actually problems that you haven't faced before. Right? You start seeing scale problems, you start seeing reliability problems. Like on day one, nobody talks about scale, right? Like from an engineering standpoint, just giving an engineering example. When on the first day when we process like 3 transactions a day, that doesn't matter, like no scale problem. But then suddenly we start doing 3,000, 3 lakh, 3 million transactions a day. You start looking at those kind of problems, and those are all interesting problems to solve for. Similarly, on the business side of things as well, you start looking at ways to automate some of the stuff. You start looking at it more systems driven, process driven as against people driven,
Right.
right? How do I make the business run in a self-sustaining manner even when I'm not there, right? That's kind of the goal eventually. So all of these are new problems that you will encounter, and will always be exciting to solve for as your business keeps growing. So it doesn't actually feel like burnout at all.
Work. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into some metrics of the guy. Let's get into some metrics of Hypto, right?
Sure.
So at the peak, what was the revenue of Hypto?
So we touched $5 million a year.
Five.
Right? That was good. Yeah.
Got it. And if I were to break this customer-wise, how many customers did you have?
So number of peak at our peak, I think our number of active customers was around 500 plus. Yeah,
Yeah, you had 500 customers. Got it. And 5 million ARR.
yeah, 5 million plus a
Got it.
year.
And
That is
what
the.
was your year-on-year growth?
So we actually, in terms of actual revenue, right? Like that is an actual revenue growth. So I think the first year we
Okay,
were
1 minute. Before you jump into that, Aravind, let's get into SaaS 101. What is ARR? What is
okay.
actual revenue? Let's define this crystal clear for everyone.
Sure. Actually, I mean, ARR was the wrong number to use, I guess, since we are in the fintech space. So ARR is defined as annual recurring revenue, right? But in fintech, it is actually annualized run rate. So in SaaS, the definition is recurring revenue, but in fintech, it's actually annualized run rate. So what that essentially means in SaaS, you can have annual contracts or you can have monthly contracts, right? ARR should actually be the total of the annual contracts that you have, right? And monthly contracts should not be counted as is. You have to discount churn and then only be counted for annual run rate. Oh, sorry, annual recurring revenue in SaaS. But in fintech, that's not how it works. Fintech is just your monthly revenue for that particular month multiplied by 12, right? So it's just a run rate number, right? If this revenue that I incurred in this month was the same for the next 11 months, what is the total number? That is the number that works in fintech. Slash SaaS works slightly differently. So in our case, it was run rate, right? It was monthly revenue multiplied by 12.
Got it. Okay. So and what was your year-on-year growth again?
So our year-on-year growth was 4x, right? So from 2021 to 2022, that was the growth. But by end of 21-22 financial year, we had already decided to pause and stop operations. So that was always going to go down. I mean, we would have grown much faster if we had actually spent a lot more energy and time on it to grow it as a business, right? But
Got
we
it.
had
And for
taken.
every 10 clients you got, how many clients did you guys win?
Sorry, I mean, I didn't get it.
For every 10 leads you received, 10 valid leads, how many did convert?
So the overall number of leads that we got was 10,000 plus, right? And the number of total active customers that we had was 2,000 plus. So that was the ratio that we had, right?
No, but
So
then you can minus the junk leads that are there and take total uh, valid leads and how many
yeah.
converted. Like you would have lost a few leads, right? So I'm trying to understand what was your win rate.
So here, see, we are a self sign up platform, right? So a lead is something like somebody has signed up on a website. They get access to the dashboard right away. There is no concept of a sale. It's all TLG, right? Like in a SaaS term. So somebody signs
Right.
up on our website using their email ID. They submit documents. We review the documents and their account is activated. They start transacting using our APIs. This is the
Right.
flow, right? So the number of people who signed up with an email ID without, irrespective of whether they submitted documents or not, was around 10,000 odd, right? And then 10,000 plus, like about 10,000. And then the number of people who made at least one transaction using our platform was slightly above 2,000. That was the number, right? But if you look at number of active merchants who made say more than 10 transactions, that number would be around 1,000.
Got it. And what were your customer acquisition costs?
I mean, see, majority of our leads were driven
Google
by word of
AdWords.
mouth. So
Oh,
Google AdWords
yeah.
was actually a very small, minuscule number. So the total marketing spend that we did over the entire journey of Hypto would be around 15 lakhs max, like 12 to 15 lakhs. I mean, not
A
more than
month,
that.
right?
No, no, no. Across entire Hypto's
Wow.
uh,
That's the
four
dream
years
company
journey.
to have.
Yeah, yeah. So our peak spend in one single month was 1 lakh, right? We have never crossed 1 lakh, more than 1 lakh of Google ad marketing spend, right? I mean, any
Right.
marketing spend. So,
Got it. Okay, let's get into the last section of this podcast. Right. So if you were to start crypto once again, what would you do differently?
see, I mean, it's very difficult to say that in our hindsight, right? Because I can actually justify every decision we made at Hypto. uh, considering the information that we had and the context that we had at that point in time, I would say every decision that we took was justifiable, right? It just that, end of the day, the market and the external factors led to the outcome that eventually led to where we had to, shut down, return capital back to investors, and then pivot to a new company. All of that happened primarily because of this, right? Like, if I had to go dig deep and say what would I have done differently, the only thing I think I could have done differently is chosen not to run a fintech company, right? Because for me, the more I look at it, I don't get the conviction to actually build a large outcome or a large business. So the goal for me when I started Hypto was to get to a financial position that gives me the freedom to choose what I want to do with my life. Right? That was a motivating factor for me. Right? That had a say numerical, financial goal aspect
What
associated
is
with
the
it. And
financial goal? I say,
yeah, for me,
what is the
I think
intrinsic value?
yeah, I felt like when I started crypto in 2018, 100 crores would be the number that I would want to aim for. That makes me comfortable for life or even luxurious life without having to worry about my kids or grandkids, for example.
Right,
Right? That was like retirement type of
right.
money, and then have the freedom to choose what you want post that, right? That was my thought process at that point. I think my thought process also evolved a lot since then. Now my number is much lower than that, right? For me now, it's like if I have a house that I own that I don't have to keep shifting on a monthly or on an annual basis, that's more than enough, right? Like whatever the number that can help me do that. That's the I think when you become older, you are willing to settle for slightly lower expectations, I guess. But yeah, so at crypto, I guess one thing that I should have realized was what was the potential for fintech in India, right? And especially payments in India. So crypto, we did not go after crypto, right? Crypto happened to us. It was more like I said, market boomed. We did not do anything to actually control the market or change the market in any way. The market boomed for external reasons. We just went along with the ride, and then suddenly market started dropping. We knew we took a proactive step to stop this business because we did expect the market to fall harder than it had risen previously. So that's what we did. So fintech was not something that I think has a huge potential in India to provide the outcome that I had in mind. So maybe I should not have taken up that business and started a SaaS business, for example, right? Which has that opportunity by default of from India selling to the US market. You have a lot of intrinsic advantages associated with it as well.
Got it.
But I
So,
think the other thing was yeah. Okay. So the other thing was, I mean, Abhishek did not want to run a SaaS business at that point in time. He has now changed his opinion. So yeah.
okay, give us three hacks. I know you quite well, and you're all about productivity and how to optimize your time in the most efficient manner, right?
Yeah.
So give us three
Yeah.
hacks. It can be any hacks or three tools that has changed your life, that has increased your productivity, or that really helped Hypto in a significant way.
Okay. I mean, see, the best tool that I've ever used is Excel, right? That's the starting point. Like
Are you an Excel
I
guy or a Google Sheet guy?
I'm an Excel guy. I'm a Microsoft guy. I'm an Excel guy. So I'm a huge fan of Excel. I think I started. Yeah, I know I paid for my first Microsoft product even when I was in college. Right? Like nobody does that in India, as far as I know. But I didn't do that. I actually bought a licensed version of Microsoft Office in my college itself. Right. So I think I always have been using Excel for anything, even for writing and documenting stuff. And the one thing that I always felt has improved my quality of life is tracking everything to a minute detail, right? So, and I have set up my own individual personal tracker in Excel, right? So I track my finances, I track my time, I track, the food that I eat. All of this literally happens using Excel
Can you share
files.
a template of this? Can you share a template of this sheet that you did?
Yeah, sure, sure. I have all of
Okay.
the templates, right? So I can do share that, but I'm not sure that will be useful because that template is very hard coded to my use cases. So not
Got it.
everybody might find it helpful. But yeah, I can share it for sure. That's kind of, I think, the three aspects that I look at. One is finance. Considering I'm running a startup, I need to be frugal. So if I don't track it, I don't know how much I'm spending. So that's a very important aspect for me. The second is time. Right? Where do I spend my time? I also need to be very judiciously spending time with my personal life now that I have a kid and all of that. Right? Like, uh, I know I haven't spent as much time as I would have liked to, but that's still without this tracker. I don't think I would have spent even this much. Right? And yeah, the third is a food habit that I do want to fix, but yeah, that I don't think is going to happen anytime soon. Everybody has limited amount of, let's say, willpower, and my willpower is spent on uh, office and my personal life that I don't have that willpower
Got it.
until that will be put yet. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, yours two CEOs you're tracking today.
See, I mean, in terms of CEOs,
Okay,
right?
wait.
Like,
Before you answer the question, are you an Elon fan?
yeah, it's
Yes,
a
no.
very okay. Yes, no, I mean, yes, yeah, definitely yes. Yeah. If you had to
But you
ask
got it.
me yes or no, I would say yes. But yeah,
Got
there
it.
are
But two
always
CEOs you're tracking, or you look
yeah.
up to.
One is definitely Jeff Bezos. That is
Okay.
by default, right? And the second one is Nadella, right? So both of them, I think, have done. I mean, Jeff Bezos. When you work in Amazon, you kind of like obviously everybody outside also knows, but
Yeah.
having been part of that culture for even a short duration, made me realize the extent to which one person has thought so deeply about an organization that even when it scales to million people, million plus people, everybody speaks the same language. I have not seen any company or examples that have been able to do that. Right? Literally anybody who joins Amazon even today, within their first few weeks itself, they will get up to speed on what Amazon's culture is and be able to articulate the same way that Amazon expects them to, and that has helped them achieve the status that they are in, right? And Nadella, I think, purely from a performance standpoint, right, over the last 10 years, after he took over from Steve Ballmer, I guess, right, like when Microsoft was not doing so well in the previous 10, 15 years, he came in and he just redid everything from scratch. And I was like, no, I don't think I don't think a lot of people were expecting that to happen, but he managed to just overpower everybody, and Microsoft is now like one of,
Yeah,
again, considering,
there's a rumor. I don't know if you saw this rumor. I don't know if it's true also that Microsoft is investing a huge amount of money in OpenAI's ChatGPT
yeah,
three,
yeah,
ChatGPT 3, and they do not acquire 49% or something like that, like something crazy. And
yeah,
people are
yeah,
saying the master stroke. I don't have an opinion, but that's what
yeah.
everybody is going on LinkedIn about today.
Yeah, I think they've already invested. Like they had invested a
Initially,
billion
yes,
dollars
yes,
earlier, and now
yes,
it's they want to go deeper into that. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, so that was one thing. Like, yeah, heavily appreciated them. But in terms of, so I think there is another CEO that I look up to, not from a business standpoint, but as a product manager, uh, is Jack Dorsey. Right. So like he is one of the best product guys, or literally the best product person out there, who has been able to run a fintech company and a social media company, and that's just completely two different use cases, problem statements, and everything. But he was able to bring something unique and insightful in both those spaces. That's something I
What
look
about
up
Adam
to.
Newman?
Right? I mean, that's yeah. So
You don't have to answer that question. Don't worry about it. Okay, any two CEOs in the Indian context?
so I definitely love looking up to I what Girish has done specifically in the SaaS ecosystem. Right, he's done an amazing job of creating this uh, Chennai as the SaaS capital of India, and also within Freshworks, portraying that uh, culture of there are certain good things as well about what investment has can do for a SaaS company. Like for example, there are bootstrap company. Like for example, Zoho is a bootstrap company, right? They are, for example, they are making more money than Freshworks today, right? They've crossed the $1 billion revenue mark. But Freshworks, while they will get there eventually, they did that in a different approach, not in a bootstrap approach, and uh, that is generally not associated with a Chennai culture, right? Like Chennai is more conservative compared to most other places in the country. And I think Girish was one of the first few people from Chennai who was able to look at capital as a resource and then use that to accelerate business, not being a very conservative business guy, right? And that's something that he broke the norms, which was not there in the Chennai ecosystem previously.
And the other one?
Other one, like, there are, I would say, I mean, definitely the founders of Flipkart for sure, right? Purely because of what they have achieved, competing with the behemoth like Amazon and uh, even beating them to an extent, right? And gaining market share and becoming one of the top two players in the country. I don't think that's a normal feat to any extent, right? Like when you have a guy like Bezos and taking them head on is definitely a challenge, and they managed to succeed.
Got it. One last final question, Aravind. One
Sorry,
book.
I should have actually. I think I missed this. Majeti, like Swiggy CEO, was my college senior, right? At IIM Calcutta, like immediate college senior, right? And like I was always like in college, he used to be this eccentric guy, right? And everybody knew that I think, was like he took time off, for example, to travel the world. Like he got a job in investment bank at Nomura in London, right? But he then quit the job in a short span, and then he took some time off to travel the world, which was like unheard of for an MBA grad within like 1 year of joining work in an investment bank and all of that, right? Like, but you always knew he was going to do great things, and he eventually did.
Got it. Okay. And one last question is one book that you think everybody in the startup ecosystem that wants to become big, irrespective of whether they're a product manager, marketer, sales, whatever, needs to read.
Okay. So, I mean, I wouldn't call this a startup book, but I would call this a book that everybody needs to read, uh, purely to understand how to think of money and finances. And this is The Intelligent Investor, right? Yeah. So it's not about startups or anything. It is just that, you know, nobody teaches you how to handle your money, right? And
I 100% agree. And in the Indian context, I recently read this book by Monica, I forget her full name, and it was excellent. I'll read. I'll come back to you with the name, but
sure.
yeah. But I love the Intelligent Investor.
Yeah, I mean, for me,
Thank
like
you so much for
yeah, sure.
thank you so much for your time, Aravind. And you're the first person I'm launching this podcast to. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ajay. Thanks for having me. Yeah, great talking.
Thank you.